Nothing happened at Brink's, and why that's important. By Paul Palango. This is an unusual and important story about nothing happening at 19 Leslie Avenue in the Burnside Industrial Park in the north end of Dartmouth. The business where this nothingness took place is Brink's Canada, the Virginia-based security and protection company. The nothingness has been going on since March 30th, 2020. That was the day that Gabriel Wortman drove through the open gates of Brink Security in a white, decommissioned RCMP cruiser, rang a buzzer, went inside a secure room, signed his name on a document and left with a surprisingly small carry-all containing $475,000 in $100 bills. Along with Maclean's magazine journalists Stephen Marr and Shannon Gormley, I reported that transaction on June 19, 2020, complete with video proof provided to me by confidential sources. The Nova Scotia shooter case has hallmarks of an undercover operation, was the headline of the story. There hasn't been anything like that since, one of the sources told me recently. Nothing! That flies in the face of the RCMP's version of events, supported by Jessica Davis, a self-described private securities and intelligence expert. Immediately after the Maclean story was published, Davis contacted Marr denouncing the story. She pointed out that she had in the past worked for Fintrack, the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Center for Canada, and knew something about these kinds of dealings. Davis did not promote the fact that she was a former soldier and an agent with the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service. Former size spook Jessica Davis says Gabriel Wortman definitely wasn't a federal agent or informant of any kind. Davis later told Tim Bousquet of the Halifax Examiner that based on documents provided by the RCMP which purport to show that Wortman had cashed in some investments and guaranteed investment certificates, the withdrawal from the Brink's warehouse was a somewhat normal procedure. Davis said that Wortman may have been laundering money but, unfortunately, was never investigated for that. According to the police documents, Wortman ordered the money 5 days earlier from CIBC. The money was sent to the Brink's warehouse through CIBC Intria, the bank's ATM division which provides cash to bank machines. This struck me as simply a small-town transaction, Davis told Bousquet. The bank didn't have that kind of money in its vault, so they made the transfer through Brink's. Think about it. According to Davis' analysis, Halifax, the financial and banking center of the Maritime Provinces, is a small town where the CIBC Bank couldn't come up with $475,000, about the average price of a single detached house in the city at that time. Davis then arrived at the following conclusion, that shows he wasn't being paid because he was an RCMP informant. That's Maclean's story is all wrong, Davis told Bousquet, who eagerly reported her opinion. If it's so normal, as Davis has repeatedly suggested, why doesn't it happen all the time? The CIBC is known to be the preferred bank used by the RCMP. Recently, a tipster in New Brunswick contacted us with information about what they had witnessed in that province. This person, who sought and was granted anonymity, was familiar with the operations of the CIBC in New Brunswick. In all my years, I only saw 2 cases where large amounts of cash were directed to be delivered to a Brink's warehouse for pickup, the source said. One was for an undercover Mountie and the other one was for someone in the Witness Protection Program. Another source in Western Canada earlier described himself as a former RCMP paid informant, which was reported on page 352 of my book 22 Murders, Investigating the Massacres, Cover-Up and Obstacles to Justice in Nova Scotia. When I saw that video, I knew right away that he was an informant. The RCMP always uses CIBC and Brink's. I made 2 cash pickups at Brink's, at 2 different locations in Western Canada. The first one was in 1996.1, got $150,000 once and, I think, $175,000 the next time. I had to sign all the paperwork in advance, and I got a chit for the money. I went to the Brink's yard, rang the bell, and was shown into a little room. I had to show them the chit and my driver's license, and I got the money. It was exactly the same thing. Once again, it raises the thorny question about whether Wortman was someone on the payroll of the RCMP in some capacity. It is a question that, so far, has been assiduously avoided by the Mass Casualty Commission investigating the massacres. It seems to have no interest in Wortman's criminal behavior. The RCMP has denied that Wortman had any kind of special relationship with the RCMP in Nova Scotia. Besides the fact that might well be an outright lie, it is also entirely possible that it's a lie of omission, that his special relationship was, in fact, with the RCMP in New Brunswick. If so, the RCMP and government there aren't saying a word. The RCMP officer in charge at the time, Assistant Commissioner Larry Tremblay, was sacked in an unprecedented fashion last year by the provincial government without a plausible explanation. This much is known. From 2016 to 2020, the New Brunswick RCMP ran two massive and complex operations, Projects J Thunder and J Thunderstruck, targeting the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club as it moved into and expanded its foothold in the province and the rest of the Maritimes. The Hells Angels have evolved from a 1% outlaw motorcycle club into a dominant organized crime entity in Canada. In their new book, Inside the Montreal Mafia, The Confessions of Andrew Scappa, veteran investigative journalists Felix Sequin and Eric Thibault show how the Hells Angels work closely with many traditional organized crime groups, including the Calabrian and Sicilian mafias. In the two RCMP projects in New Brunswick, the Mounties were laser-focused on the activities of Emery Pitt Martin and Robin Moulton, who are Hells Angels' elite nomads. According to court documents filed in the cases, a number of informants, most of them unnamed, were used to gather evidence in the various cases that were mounted. A key revelation in their book was how the RCMP, among other police forces, have slightly shifted their practices away from named and numbered informants to unofficial informants who are treated in much the same way as a regular informant but whose identity is not recorded in official records off the books. For example, the subject of their book, Andrew Scappa, was a mafia leader in Montreal but also was an off-the-books police informant. He ended up being murdered on October 21, 2019. Even though he was considered to be off the books, Scappa's name could be found in internal police lists of known informants, a list that came to light shortly before his death when a rogue police officer tried to cash in the information with organized crime leaders. In the Nova Scotia Spinquery, as we have come to call it on the Nighttime podcast with Jordan Bonaparte, there have been statements released showing that Wortman had an inordinate number of contacts with RCMP and other police officers. For example, Constable Grade Wiley paid Wortman 16 visits between 2008 and 2017, but says he didn't have a special relationship with him. One of Wortman's best friends was the longest-serving police officer on the Halifax Police Force, a currently serving police officer who has helped us in the past with our continuing investigation. Says he and some of his fellow officers are more and more convinced that Wortman had some kind of relationship with the RCMP. If Wortman had a handler, it likely won't be the names you see coming up at the commission, the police officer said. That will be well hidden. He's probably not even in the area anymore. You know they've destroyed and manipulated evidence. That's probably what they are eager to hide. The officers believe that secret relationship, if it existed, likely had been exposed shortly before Wortman started killing people. Our way of thinking is that Wortman was brought in as an informant in Project Thunderstruck, said the police officer. That was run out of New Brunswick, but it reached into Nova Scotia. According to the police officer, problems may have arisen with documents known as informations to obtain search warrants, known as ITOs. Those documents tend to be heavily vetted before they are put out, the officer said. You have to be careful that everything in them doesn't point to an informant. If you look at it from the biker's perspective, they go over everything in those documents and ask themselves questions about who knew what and when. If there is information in there that can't be explained, like how did they know that then, it could point to a particular person who might be the informant. Maybe the informant was the only one who knew that information. For example, one ITO revealed that a camera was inserted by the RCMP into a hydraulic press used in cocaine processing. Such items were something Wortman might be familiar with from his dangerous practice. The police sources suspect that Wortman may have been the one who either provided the presses or had a hand in their acquisition. All of which brings us back to the Brink's pickup by Wortman. Project Thunderstruck appeared to wind down on April 10, 2020 with the arrest of 2 Hells Angels and 2 Red Devil MC members in New Brunswick. It was around this time that Wortman was reported to have served as a broker for a deal between the Hells Angels and another party. That has not been independently confirmed. Wortman took the money out of Brink's on March 30th. According to informed sources and confidential documents obtained by Frank Magazine, the typical procedure in the RCMP is to pay out informants 10 days before the end of the project they were working on. Finally, there is this. Sources close to the situation tell us that Wortman had 3 sets of visitors in the 48 hours before he started killing people. He was shown a video, the source said. I think that's what really set him off. Who showed Wortman the video and what was on it? Paul Palango at protonmail.com.